Well, as you know, we're doing face-to-face interviews with all of the candidates, all 16 on the ballot paper that will be presented to you in the polling stations across Mayo on Friday, the 29th of November. And this morning we're delighted to be joined in studio by Sinn Féin candidate Gerry Murray from Charlestown. Gerry, good morning and thank you for coming in.
Good morning, Tommy. How are you?
I'm well. How are you? How's the campaign going?
Well, the campaign is going well. We're enjoying the campaign, which is most important, and we're engaging with a cross-section of people right across the county, and we're receiving a very positive response. Certainly people are up for change. The mood I get, they're currently transitioning, and I think the only question is to whom they are transitioning to. But they are up for change. The nature of that change is all to fight for, and that's what we will be doing over the next 2 weeks to try and make history, and for the first time in the history of the country, since the foundation of the state, there's a very real prospect of a Sinn Féin-led government. And that's why we have a lot of candidates in the field. Last time round, we left a dozen seats behind us. This time round, we don't intend to make that mistake.
You were very much lastminute.com on the ticket. Why?
Well, essentially, I suppose we were looking basically at one eye on the opinion polls, wondering what was the best strategy. And eventually we decided that basically, if you're serious about a Sinn Féin-led government, you have to have enough candidates in the field. And therefore, the decision was to go with the maximum number of candidates, not to repeat the mistakes we made 5 years ago, where we left seats behind us.
Would it not have been practical to make that decision 3 months ago?
Well, I suppose the party viewed it that I was there, I was ever ready. I have a profile with the last 25 years. It wasn't as if I was a new kid on the block. And so basically as well, we were waiting to see what the other candidates would do. We had an expectation that there would be a Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael candidate in East Mayo. When that didn't happen, obviously that changed our view, and we felt that Sinn Féin had a good prospect and a good chance of delivering a seat in circumstances where you have no candidate at all in the East Mayo area.
But does that not suggest, Gerry, with respect, that everything seems to be left to the last minute? I mean, for example, we still haven't had a Sinn Féin manifesto.
Well, we launched the Mayo manifesto last Friday, and I think we're the only party to launch a county manifesto. Number two, large segments of that manifesto are out there in the public domain in terms of our housing and our health policy, etc. So what we're now doing basically is accumulating all of the policies that we have already launched and putting them into one document. So essentially what you will find is all of the policies that are out there with a few months will be compressed into one document. But by and large, the people know what the policies are. We launched housing, we launched childcare, we launched migration. A whole litany of policies have been launched over the last 3 or 4 months. And the reason why we were kind of ahead of the posse is that some of our policy documents are extremely detailed. Our housing document is 100 pages. In order to sell the policy, you have to show the public the detail. And there's no point showing the public the detail 2 or 3 weeks out from a general election, because a lot of people were engaging. They wanted to study the detail, because as you know and I know, the devil is always in the detail.
One of the big criticisms of Sinn Féin over many years and many general elections is that when it comes to costing projects, opposition parties always raise the red flag, and they always say that, look, it's easy to put on paper we're spending 2 billion here and 3 billion there, but that when you go into the specifics of the costings, that you've always come up short.
Well, actually, I'm glad you asked me that question, because when the ship sailed last time round in terms of the general election, the first man I had on to me was our housing spokesperson, Owner Bryn. So 5 years ago, we were basically kickstarting our housing policy. In that 5 years, Owner Bryn has literally written the book on housing. And so what we did over the last 5 years, because we realised that a Sinn Féin government was a real prospect. So we have been 5 years formulating all of these policies. They're detailed They have been costed by the Department of Finance. They also have been peer-reviewed by a lot of academics who concur with our policies, and they see all of our policies as, number one, being sustainable, number two, being innovative and original, and number three, being they have the potential to be delivered in a rather short time frame. And what we have done basically is we have gone into enormous detail. Over the last 5 years, we have met with all of the stakeholders in housing and health, so on and so forth. So the policies that we are producing are policies that the stakeholders have had made a huge contribution to. We've taken their views on board as well. And we had a huge consultation in terms of housing, in terms of health, in terms of childcare. We have met all of the stakeholders over the last 5 years, and this is the net result. And we go up, we knock on the door, and we have the QR code for people who want to look at the policies in more details.
Okay. Before we get into the specifics of if Gerry Murray was to become a TD, what it would mean for the people of Mayo, because at the end of the day, we can talk about national projects, but it's all about what you can deliver locally. But before I do that, and it's not politically,
I know,
it's not a political question per se, but there's been a lot of controversy within Sinn Féin in relation to the handling of a number of issues in the last number of months, and question marks have been raised about Mary Lou's ability to judge a situation and to act accordingly. I mean, she's been in the Dáil, she has made a forthright and honest apology for any hurt that she has caused, but that makes the electorate a little bit nervous.
Well, in any organisation, be it a sporting, be it political, be it a big corporation, these issues arise, and they have to be dealt with by human resources. But
it's how it's been
well, basically, you see, a lot of these issues are being dealt with in-house, and sometimes you wonder, is the model of dealing with them in-house really suitable? And when you go through the full process, at the end of it, there will always be an aggrieved party. And when you recruit people in good faith. You cannot legislate for all eventualities, but there's no organisation or political party that do not have to deal and confront with these issues on a weekly basis.
But was it badly handled?
Well, just to come to the point, in the last 10 years, Sinn Féin has mushroomed. We have become the biggest political party on the island of Ireland. And I myself would argue with the party and say that our structures haven't kept in tandem with the growth, and that basically we're going to have to import into the party the type of expertise that's necessary to deal with all of these issues. Basically, the party has outgrown the structures. That's the difficulty. And I've had this discussion with some of our leaders in Sinn Féin, and they're now admitting that basically the party grew bigger than the structure, and the structure wasn't fit for purpose to deal with the growth of the party. And that's the issue now that has to be sorted out and resolved. You know?
Okay, that's that nailed on the head. Let's move on to specifics. Yeah. Are you hoping that in the next 15 or 20 years we will have a united Ireland? And is there anything about that in your Mayo manifesto?
Yes, Irish unity is a big issue. It's in all of the campus sheets as well. Basically, the natural formation of this state is a 32-county republic. But what we're doing basically at the moment, we have been doing this for 20 years. When Gerry Adams and Martin McGuinness were about, they launched the project towards a new republic. And that was basically about outreach to the unionist community. I was at meetings in Galway and Sligo and around the country where you had people from the unionist community on the platform as well and exploring the concept of Irish unity. What Sinn Féin is trying to do now, Irish unity is a certainty. The demographics are changing in the north, but this isn't a numbers game. It's about laying down the foundations for when that day comes. We will have a peaceful and a smooth transition into a united Ireland. And I'm happy to say that I have met many unionists, would you believe, at our Sinn Féin Ardèches. They are engaging, particularly members from the farming unionist community are engaging with it as well. And people are looking at the whole concept of a 32-county Irish republic from in purely economic and social terms. And a lot of mainstream unionists are coming round to the view that, yes, this will happen. The Sinn Féin view is, yes, it's going to happen, but let's not have the crisis of what happened in Britain when you had a Brexit referendum. You now do the work, you put down the foundations, you do the outreach, and you prepare the ground for when that day comes, it will be a smooth transition. And look, everything will be on the table. Like we're not fundamentalists. We're quite happy to engage. For example, the unionist community might say, well, we'd prefer Dáil Éireann to be in Athlone. For example, a government and government departments in Athlone might be far more palatable for the unionist community in the north than to be ruled from Dublin. It's just the visuals of it.
Okay.
In fact, some people here west of the Shannon might be far more happier to be ruled from Athlone as opposed to be ruled from Dublin. So, like, everything is on the table.
Okay, it would be very interesting if there were a referendum to be held both north and south.
Yeah, but see, Tommy, the important thing is not the referendum. The important thing is preparing the ground. And this is why we're calling on the government to fully engage in this particular process and lay down the foundations that when that referendum occurs, that all the pieces are in place and you have a smooth transition to Irish unity.
The elephant in the room in the context of a 32 county Ireland is the economic element of it, and there have been damning reports about how much it would cost the Irish taxpayer in order to facilitate inclusion of 6 further counties. It would cost billions.
Yeah, well, we had damning reports in the run-up to the merger of East Germany and West Germany, and all of those economists were proved wrong. And number two, we also have the EU waiting in the sidelines. I was on the EU Committee of the Regions for 5 years. I had regular engagements with the EU Commission, and they said to me that they stepped up to the plate in terms of German unity, and they wouldn't have any qualms about stepping up to the plate in terms of Irish unity in order to ensure a smooth transition. And when they say stepping up to the plate, they mean writing the cheque.
Okay, but does the cheque have to be paid back?
Well, no, the cheque wouldn't have to be paid back, because this would be in the context of basically this would be the final chapter in the peace process.
All right, let's talk a few more specifics. Can I ask you about the greenways versus the railways? Because you've been very, very
Absolutely.
vocal about this.
Yeah.
In your Mayo manifesto, what are you saying about greenways?
Well, what we're saying, look, we have no objection, obviously, to greenways in principle, but it's very important to the main thing about the Western Rail Corridor. The railway in Charlestown and in Swinford and Claremorris goes all the way through to Waterford Port. Since Brexit, the new maritime route to Europe is out through Waterford Port. The UK is no longer a common transit area because obviously they've left the EU, and there is huge economic potential for that. I know companies here, healthcare companies in Mayo, they're producing a truckload of product on the hour. They want to ship that product down the line and out via Waterford Port. That means huge jobs and huge employment. We have no difficulty with a greenway adjacent to the railway. We have no difficulty with a greenway on the periphery of the rail corridor. The difficulty we have is putting the railway smack bang in the middle of the railway in circumstances where the government are now committed in bringing the line to Claremorris. And once the government announced that they intended at some point to bring the line to Claremorris, the Sligo Chamber and a lot of the multinationals in Sligo and a lot of the students in Sligo suddenly became animated about the whole project because they saw it as being a real possibility, and a real possibility in circumstances where there's up to 50-60% funded in Europe for that railway because it represents low carbon infrastructure.
So what is your belief that if Sinn Féin are in government after the 29th of November, what is going to be announced in relation to the extension of...
Well, we already announced that last Christmas when all of the, and I suppose it was a present for the Northwest, when all of the Sinn Féin TDs from the West assembled at the railway station in Sligo and said that a Sinn Féin government would open the railway all the way down into Sligo.
When?
Pardon? Oh, as soon as possible. In the first 5 years, we would basically commission a study from on the line from Claremorris to Sligo, and from Athenry to Claremorris is practically a turnkey project, and already the preliminary studies in terms of doing the work and the engineering, etc., is already underway.
Okay, so in fairness, I mean, and you're being genuinely open about this, even with the best will in the world, if Sinn Féin are in government for 5 years, we still won't have a rail line right into Sligo.
No, you won't have a railway by the next general election. Even tomorrow morning, if Sinn Féin said we're going to tender, you still wouldn't have it in 5 years.
Because of the process.
But the process, public procurement, we would have to make some realignments, so on and so forth. So, as I say, you'd have to have realignments of the line in certain places. But essentially, we would kickstart the process.
Housing, is it as big an issue in Mayo as it is in other parts of the country, particularly the cities?
Absolutely, Tommy. And I was on the canvas at the weekend, and I myself was shocked that in East Mayo, you have people paying rent of 1,600 and 1,700. I thought we were around 12 or 13. I was shocked. It's a huge issue for grandparents and parents because they see their sons and daughters paying huge rental income, sometimes a rental income that maybe half will be able to fund a sustainable mortgage. And it's hitting the local economy as well, because it means people have less money in their pocket and have less disposable income in order to cultivate the local economy. It's a massive issue.
Clarify for me, Gerry, if you would, what exactly is the housing structure that Sinn Féin are proposing? Because a lot of people are saying that one of the proposals is that you own the house, but you won't own the land.
No, that's not. Obviously, you own an apartment and you still don't own the land. So, that's not really an impediment. But what I will try and do is give you the policy in some broad kind of brush strokes. I won't go into to the whole detail. First and foremost, again, Owner Bryn was in this county 3 years ago talking to all of the stakeholders. So what Sinn Féin would do for a start is the local authorities and the state would buy the land banks. We would bring in the water, the services, the utilities, bring in the roads, etc. That saves the developer or the builder having to do that. So essentially what happens is the builder comes in and he does what he does best, namely builds the house. He builds the house on the site provided by the local authority. When he sells the house, he reimburses the local authority for the price of the site.
And who decides on the price of the site?
Well, basically, whatever the local authority, what Sinn Féin would do for a start is we would absorb the cost, the government would absorb the cost of Irish Water and the ESB, those connections and those utilities. That would reduce the price of the house by 20,000. Okay, that has been done, dusted and researched by Owner Bryn in tandem and in consultation with the local authority. So essentially, the builder, all he has to do is to build the house. The other segment of that, and there is this Public Building Finance Ireland, which was a piece of legislation that went through the Oireachtas. Essentially, it's a state bank. I'm talking to builders. They're building 4 houses. They could build 20, but they cannot get the money out of the banks. What Owen intends to do is to use this model of the state bank in order to fast-track funding to the builders to essentially build the houses. So you have a scenario where the builder hasn't to go buying a land bank. He hasn't to bring in the services. He hasn't to go through all the red tape. When it comes to planning, the local authority we can apply for planning to ourselves. It's called Part 8, and we can get planning in 8 weeks. The government are saying there's a difficulty with planning, yes, but the difficulty is not the legislation. The difficulty is that every planning unit in every local authority in this country is under-resourced and understaffed. It's not an issue of legislation, it's a staffing issue, Tommy. And I see it day after day. Planning applications are put on further information because we haven't the staff to make the decisions.
And will all of these houses that are being built by the builders, with the government paying for the utility connections and so on. Will they be a mix of social housing and private?
Affordable and private, yeah.
Right.
It'll be a mix.
So what if I buy one of those private houses and I want to sell it?
Yeah.
What
no
happens?
Problem. No, that's
but do I not have to sell it at a specific price?
No. That's only in relation to the affordable segment of the Sinn Féin policy. Yeah.
All right. So if it's a private house, then I can sell it, and if I make profit, so be it.
Good for you. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And yet the taxpayer has paid for those connections, and I walk away with a profit. Is that fair? Well, because the taxpayer has funded the house.
Well, basically,
part of it.
Yes, he has. But normally, what we have is a house in crisis. And what you do in a crisis, you do things that you wouldn't do in a normal scenario. These are all emergency initiatives by Sinn Féin in order to address the issue.
And is there a timeline, Gerry, and how long this will?
Well, the timeline will be that once the housing crisis starts to recede, then quite obviously all of those things will be reviewed, and we will get back to a normal scenario.
Okay,
quite obviously, yeah.
Let's talk about immigration. Another big hot topic. Have we taken enough refugees and asylum seekers in Mayo? Yes or no?
Oh, absolutely. I think what happens is
that an absolutely yes or no?
What happens essentially. There comes a point when you have to ask: are we at tipping point? Is it sustainable? What caused the current crisis wasn't the asylum seekers, it was the 100,000 of Ukrainian refugees that came into the country. The UK took 200,000 and we took 100,000, and the system was quite simply not able to cope with that. We always had asylum seekers. What brought the whole system to tipping point was the Ukrainian crisis. It does seem now that the Ukrainian issue is going to come to a resolution by virtue of the fact that Trump intends to pull the plug and have a ceasefire and a peace negotiation between Ukraine and Russia. I think that you will see then the numbers recede and you will see the crisis recede.
But until that happens...
But until that, what again, you see, we have a health crisis and we have a housing crisis. Why would we expect the government to manage migration when they cannot manage housing and when they cannot manage health?
Okay, but you've dodged my question. Yeah. Yes or no? Have we enough taken? Yes or no?
In my view, in certain parts of the country, we have reached tipping point.
And in others?
In others, we haven't, and this is the issue. So, some areas have none at all.
Right.
But what the policy announced by Mary Lou 2 weeks ago was that in terms of migration, currently 2/3 of all asylum applications are refused. What we propose basically is to triple the staff, and people who are refused are sent back to their country of origin. Right. So that's one element of the plan.
Yeah.
The other element of the plan is that when the Ukraine war basically draws to a close, that takes the pressure off the system completely. Then the issue is, how do you deal with the people that you make legal? Well, those people that you make legal, we do what we always did, and we had them here in Ballyhonus for 25 years in direct provision. You give them the means by which they can achieve social and economic mobility in this society, and that they can become fully fledged, productive and creative citizens in this state.
Which an awful lot of the current refugees and asylum seekers in Ireland are, because they are filling an awful lot of jobs that the Irish don't seem to want to do.
I have dealt with them for the last 20 years.
Yeah.
I was the councillor here in Ballyhonus for 5 years, and I was amazed at how ambitious they were, and for their kids and for their families. Some of them have stayed in touch with me. Some of those kids have gone on to be opticians, engineers, plumbers, etc. Some of them indeed are more Irish than the Irish themselves. So the policy basically is, you can't have open borders. You have to have a system that's rigid, that's tough. If people don't make the grade, you send them back. And the people that do make the grade, you ensure that they become fully productive citizens of this state. All
right, look, health. Mayo University Hospital gets an awful lot of bad press here from people complaining about trolleys. Once you get into the system, great, but how do you get rid of the trolleys?
Well, the trolleys is more beds, more resources.
More money.
More money, and David Cullen has done that. He has basically published a very comprehensive plan in terms of in terms of what has to be done. The total cost of our plan is 5.4 billion in current expenditure, funded by 3.6 billion additional expenditure in health, and 829 million in the Department of Disability, and through 1 billion of savings. Sinn Féin would deliver a 15 billion capital investment programme, including 2 billion from the Apple Tax monies. But like planning, the issue in our hospitals is a resource issue. It's understaffing. And also we have to beef up primary care. You know what I mean? The whole system, Tommy, is at breaking point. And there's people landing in to A&E that could be dealt with if you had a proper primary care system. We also intend to directly fund 300 or 400 doctors that will be employed directly by the state, that won't be attached to any health centre, will be employed by the state to deal with all of these situations.
And where will you find them, Gerry?
Well, look, there's loads of doctors in Cuba, Tommy. And Cuba, yes. I've my late wife Pauline had she was ill for a long period of time. Unfortunately, we had to call West Dock on a number of occasions, and I have to say sometimes it was Cuban doctors that came along, and they were every bit as good, if not better, and their duty of care was
second to none.
Oh, I have to say, on a number of occasions, they wouldn't even leave the house until the ambulance arrived. But plus the fact is, a lot of our healthcare workers are leaving the country, so we have to basically incentivise them people to return. I talk to doctors, Irish doctors who are abroad, and one of the main reasons they left Ireland was just pure burnout and lack of job satisfaction, and they were so frustrated with an under-resourced health system.
Okay, time is almost against us. Very quickly, if you were in charge of finance, what would you do with the 14 billion Apple windfall? I was listening to one economist saying this morning that if we were prudent, we would put it away because, you know, it's easy to throw money out like confetti at a wedding in manifestos, but the reality is we might need that money at the end of this decade.
Well, I was in Brussels last year when this debate was underway, and the EU Commission asked me, what would you do with the 14 billion? And I said, what do you think we should do with it? Well, they said the northwest of Ireland, out of 234 regions of Europe, Mayo and the northwest is 218 in terms of development out of 234. And they said, would the Irish government not consider investing a large portion of that money in the northwest, and we in Europe could match it euro by euro? And that's what I would like to see. See, you can give money to GA clubs, handball clubs, soccer clubs. It's petty cash. It's great to buy an election, but basically the underlying problem here, west of the Shannon, is a very acute infrastructural deficit. Look at the N17. You know what I mean? That motorway should have been built 10 years ago. And if we're going to have investment and employment, the first step on that road is critical infrastructure. And you have to have critical infrastructure. It's the fundamental basis of economics. First of all, you have the critical infrastructure, then comes the investment, then comes the employment, and then you have a sustainable region here in the northwest and here in Mayo. But on the 29th of November, and sometimes people are afraid, Tommy, to embrace change. Change can be frightening for some people. But, you know, they can have more of the same or they can have change. On the 29th of November, the people of this county and of this country will be able to make history by voting for a Sinn Féin-led government. The choice is theirs. It's basically, do you want change or do you want more of the same?
Is it possible for Sinn Féin to get 2 seats in Mayo? Be honest.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean to say, last time round, there was a bounce in the polls. Sinn Féin nationally left a dozen seats behind us. Things can change in days in the course of an election campaign. The reason why we have fielded a full team this time round is that we won't have a repeat of what happened five years ago when we left a dozen seats behind us.
Okay. All right. Gerry Murray, thank you very much indeed for coming in.
As always, thanks for your hospitality.
No problem.
And it's always a pleasure to... We go back a long time.
We certainly do.
Yeah, conversations on homecoming.
All of that and more. That, by the way, was a play which Gerry and I were involved in many, many moons ago. Thank you very much. Gerry Murray, Sinn Féin. Tomorrow morning we will have Aontú representative Paul Lawless in studio to talk about why he wants your number one.